In Peru, several social organizations call for regional strikes against the government of Dina Boluarte and demand the closing of Congress. In Argentina, over 5 million people took to the streets to celebrate the historic victory at the Qatar 2022 World Cup. In Nigeria, local authorities report 2 separate attacks by gunmen that killed more than 50 villagers in the troubled northern state of Kaduna. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Luis Alberto Matos from the teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. In Peru, several social organizations call for regional strikes against the government of Dina Boluarte and demand the closing of Congress. The Front for the Defense of the People of Ayacucho, together with other social movements, called for a strike and blockade of the main roads in the region to demand the calling of a constituent assembly. According to a communique from the Front, the situation revealed the offensive of the right wing and the ultra-right to take over the powers of the state. On the other hand, the plenary of the Congress will resume on Tuesday to debate on the early elections for 2023. So far, police crackdown on protesters has left 26 people dead. Amid protests and mobilizations in several regions of Peru, the plenary of Congress approves on Tuesday to reconsider the bill to bring forward the general elections to 2023, as requested by the Peruvian executive after a previous vote in which the initiative was rejected. Parliament approved the reconsideration with 94 votes in favor, 25 against and 5 abstentions. In a new plenary session, they will vote again on Tuesday whether to approve the advance of elections. The measure has the support of the interim president Dina Boluarte. However, it is widely condemned even by her leftist allies as a self-coup and an act of political suicide. On the other hand, the appointment of a new premier to replace Pedro Angulo is being planned. Mexican Foreign Minister Marcelo Ebrard said on Tuesday his nation has granted asylum to the family of former Peruvian President Pedro Castillo. Speaking at President Andrés Manuel López Obrador's daily conference, Foreign Minister Ebrard stated that asylum had been granted to Castillo's wife, Lilia Paredes, and their 2 minor children, who are in the Mexican embassy in Lima. He also explained that authorities from both nations are now negotiating a safe passage so that if the family wishes to leave, they can do so. Meanwhile, protests continued in the streets of Peru demanding the release of former President Pedro Castillo, the closure of Congress, the resignation of the current head of state Dina Boluarte, and early elections for 2023.
Are the negotiations still in progress? Have they accepted it or not?
The asylum has been granted because they are in Mexican territory. That is to say, they are in our embassy, and when they are in the embassy, the asylum is granted to them. It is an independent decision of Mexico. Now, what is being negotiated would be the safe conduct, so that if they wish to leave, they can do it and come to Mexico, if they wish. But they are in Mexican territory because they are in our embassy.
In the embassy, in our representation. Foreign Minister, thanks.
Brazil's Chamber of Deputies is preparing to vote on the so-called constitutional amendment proposal that seeks to finance the social assistance program called Bolsa Familia. The measure was approved in the Senate on December 7th by 64 of the 81 representatives, but faces resistance from deputies who still want to negotiate fragments of the initiative. In this sense, the president of the lower house, Arthur Lira, denied that the vote on the proposal is delayed by agreements for positions in the Lula da Silva government. He also detailed that the content foresees the expansion of at least $27.9 billion to accommodate the Bolsa Familia program and other programs by 2023. Argentina's World Cup winning squad arrived home to a jubilant Buenos Aires on Tuesday as millions of people lined the streets and celebrated their champion's return. On arriving in the country on Tuesday morning, team captain Lionel Messi stepped off the plane first, holding the gold trophy aloft, followed by his triumphant team onto a red carpet. As the team bus departed the airport, it was immediately swarmed by cheering supporters dressed in the national colors of blue and white. Some 5 million people came out to see the victory parade in the capital. Tuesday had been declared a national holiday following the team's thrilling penalty shootout victory over France in Qatar on Sunday. The bus carrying the entire team was meant to make its way to the obelisk, a historic monument in the center of Buenos Aires, but was not able to progress due to the swarming crowds. The team will spend the night at the Argentine Football Association's training facility. In Chile, the Congress approved on Monday the reinstatement of compulsory voting for elections and popular plebiscites which the country had repealed in 2012. The norm was approved by 124 votes in favor, 6 against and 3 abstentions in the Chamber of Deputies, which dispatched the constitutional reform that establishes the mandatory nature of voting in all elections but primaries. The fines and sanctions for the non-compliance of this duty are left to an organic law, together with the voters who will be exempt from it. According to the initiative already approved, the measure builds and elevates the commitment and civic responsibility of the population and helps to fight corruption and electoral frauds. Haitian health authorities began a vaccination campaign to immunize more than 1.5 million people threatened by the outbreak of cholera in the Caribbean country. The immunization is taking place in the midst of armed gang violence and a deep humanitarian crisis. According to the United Nations Children's Fund, which is collaborating with the Haitian authorities, 1.64 million residents will be vaccinated, among them children under 5 years of age, who make up almost half of the total number of patients confirmed with the disease. The international organization also announced that it will support the process with some 2,300 vaccination teams, transportation fuel, and the management of biomedical waste. The current campaign will be extended on Thursday 22nd, and from the 27th and 28th of December it will be carried out in complex areas of the capital and the central zone of the country. Let's take a short break, but first remember you can follow us on TikTok at the account at teleSUR English, in which you'll be able to see news in different formats, news updates, and much more. Other stories coming up, stay with us. Welcome back from the South. The U.S. budget proposal for 2023 provides $13.37 billion to fund the Ukrainian regime, according to the text of the document posted on the House of Representatives website. The document also notes that it plans to allocate $11.88 billion to resupply U.S. equipment delivered to Ukraine. U.S. President Joe Biden involved his country in the Ukrainian conflict by sending large quantities of weapons. Russia launched on February 24th a military operation in Donetsk and Lugansk to defend civilians who for many years have been victims of genocide by the Ukrainian regime. Both territories became independent from Ukraine in 2014 following the coup d'etat in that country and joined Russia last September after holding referendums endorsed by the overwhelming majority of those populations. Moscow has warned that any shipment of weapons to Kiev will become a legitimate target for the Russian armed forces. The United States state of Texas deployed over 400 National Guard troops and other personnel to El Paso City as the U.S. Supreme Court temporarily halted the termination of an asylum limiting policy during the COVID-19 pandemic. Long lines of people were seen to have crossed border into El Paso from Mexico every day recently as the border policy known as Title 42, which allows the U.S. government to swiftly expel asylum seekers at the border during the pandemic, was set to end on Wednesday. According to Texas Military Office, the deployment aimed to safeguard the border and repel and turn back people trying to cross it illegally. The federal government has released $6 million for El Paso as the city said in its emergency declaration that it lacks resources to ensure asylum seekers have shelter from the cold and food, fearing lower temperatures expected this week could be deadly for people who have had to sleep on the streets. Japan's foreign ministry confirmed on Tuesday it signed an agreement with Sweden on the transfer of defense equipment and technology. During a phone call, Japanese Foreign Minister Hayashi Yoshimasa, together with his Swedish counterpart Tobias Billström, welcomed the signing of the agreement on the transfer of defense equipment and technology. Hayashi said the deal aimed at further cooperation between Japan and Sweden, as well as between Japan and the European Union, in order to address common challenges of international community. Russian President Vladimir Putin held a telephone conversation with Brazilian President-elect Luiz Inácio da Silva on Tuesday and congratulated him on his victory in the recent elections. The head of the Kremlin congratulated Lula on his victory in the recent elections and wished him success in his government activities. The parties expressed confidence that Moscow and Brazil will continue strategic cooperation in all areas, including within the framework of the BRICS. Lula da Silva will take office on January 1st. In Hungary, the authorities urged the European Commission to examine the consequences of sanctions against Russia. In statements to the press, the advisor to the Hungarian Prime Minister, Balázs Orbán, considered that the leaders of the European Union countries should hold serious talks on the effect of the restrictions before approving the 10th and 11th package of sanctions against the Eurasian nation. These statements come as he commented on Hungary's blocking of the inclusion in the sanctions list of 3 Russian officials, including Energy Minister Nikolai Shulginov. Such an action, he said, would be unacceptable from the point of view of Hungarian energy security, as the country is engaged in energy negotiations with him. The British court upheld the government's controversial plan to remove migrants to Rwanda, ignoring criticism from human rights groups saying that it is inhumane. Announcing the UK High Court's ruling, Judge Cliff Lewis said the court had concluded that it is lawful for the government to make arrangements to relocate asylum seekers to Rwanda and for their asylum claims to be determined in Rwanda and not in the UK. However, he emphasized that the Home Office must consider the particular circumstances of the migrants before deporting them to the Central African country. Lewis also admitted that the Home Secretary had not adequately considered the circumstances of the first group of refugees who were to be deported to Rwanda, so he warned that more legal battles lie ahead. In his speech, United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres stated this was not a time to sit on the sidelines, but a time for resolve and determination.
This year with one overriding conviction. This is not a time to sit on the sidelines. It's a time for resolve, determination, and yes, even hope. Because despite the limitations and long odds, we are working to push back against despair, to fight back against disillusion, and to find real solutions. Delegates at the COP15 UN Biodiversity Conference in Montreal agreed on a new global biodiversity framework. We are finally starting to forge a peace pact with nature. This framework is an important step for determined diplomacy, and I urge all countries to deliver.
Regarding the situation in Africa, the United Nations Secretary General stressed that efforts by the African Union to negotiate peace are a reason for hope in the continent.
In Ethiopia, efforts by the African Union to broker peace are a reason for hope. A cessation of hostilities and implementation agreements are in place. A pathway to assistance in the northern part of the country is emerging. In the Democratic Republic of the Congo, diplomatic efforts led by Angola and the East African Community have created a framework for political dialogue to resolve the crisis in the eastern region of the country. And the truce in Yemen has delivered real dividends for people.
We have more news coming up after a final short break, so don't go away. Welcome back from the south. In Nigeria, 2 separate attacks by gunmen killed more than 50 villagers in the troubled northern state of Kaduna, local officials said this Monday. Criminal gangs have been attacking villages in the northwest and central parts of the country for years, stealing livestock, kidnapping people for ransom, looting food and burning down homes. Kaduna is one of the most affected states by armed groups in northern Nigeria. Its Commissioner for Internal Affairs, Samuel Arwan, confirmed that several people were killed in the attacks but did not give a definite death toll, adding that the army had deployed to the area to hunt down the attackers. Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari is under intense pressure to end the violence before he leaves office next year. Ethiopia is experiencing one of the largest education crises globally, mainly due to internal conflict and the effects of climate change. Based on estimates by the Ethiopian government, over 13 million children are out of school in the East African country, and the figure has seen a rapid increase due to the internal conflict over the past 2 years. 500,000 children in the country did not go to school during the past 6 months because of climate-induced disasters, particularly droughts. Moreover, the security crisis in the Sahel region, including Mali, Burkina Faso, and the Democratic Republic of the Congo, as well as across East Africa, has caused massive displacements, which are severely impacting the rights of children and adolescents to education. Syrian air defenses shot down an Israeli missile attack on the capital Damascus. The Sana news agency, citing a military source, said Israeli Air Force jets launched their missiles from over the Sea of Galilee in northern Israel. The state-run news agency added that damage had been caused to the sites that were struck. However, the extent of the damage was unclear. 2 soldiers were wounded as a result of the strikes, but their conditions were not immediately clear. The Prime Ministers of Iraq and Kuwait arrived in Amman, Jordan, on Tuesday to attend a conference focused on bolstering security and stability in Iraq. Iraqi Prime Minister Muhammad Shia al-Sudani and Kuwait Sheikh Ahmed al-Nawaf al-Hamad al-Sabah were received by Jordan's Crown Prince Hussein bin Abdullah at Amman's Queen Alia International Airport. The conference convened under the theme Support for Iraq is Sovereignty, Security and Stability, as well as its political process, its economic and development progress, and its effort to rebuild. Brought high-level officials from Saudi Arabia and Iran, along with leaders from France, Iraq, Turkey, Oman, and the European Union. The Indian government has scaled up troop deployment along this border with China to an unprecedented level. Foreign Minister Subrahmanyam Jaishankar stated that the recent deployment aimed at not allowing China change the status quo at the border. His comments came days after Indian and Chinese forces clashed in a disputed area along the border in Arunachal Pradesh state. India and China share a 3,000 kilometers disputed border called the Line of Actual Control, which is poorly demarcated. Soldiers on either side come face to face at many points, and tensions sometimes escalate into clashes. In China on Tuesday, President Xi Jinping said during a telephone conversation with his Ivorian counterpart that he is willing to defend fairness and international justice together with African countries. The Chinese President Xi Jinping emphasized that Beijing is willing to work with African countries to defend their sovereignty, as well as to safeguard the common interests of developing countries. He also stressed that the cooperation between China and Ivory Coast has broad prospects, and they are willing to develop teams in all areas, especially in trade and agriculture. Xi Jinping said that his country will support companies investing in Yamoussoukro and boost relations in areas such as digital economy, alternative energy, and others. We have come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. You can also join us on social media: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm Luis Alberto Matos. Thank you for watching.